Vamos, por tanto, a arrancar con esta primera conversación que hemos
So we will
titulado
start this first discussion that to which we've given the title of Building a Spirit of Community, and we have asked our guests to think about everyday life, and it is a great honor to have with us Cynthia Fleury, a philosopher, and also someone who thinks that knowledge needs to go to other places, not books, and goes to hospitals, prisons. And she believes that building the community is something that requires how to take care of a society. How does a society take care of those who are about to break? And care is the essential for her of a democratic life. And this is a very specific form of fraternity. So thank you so much. Antonio Monegal is with her, professor, curator, and essayist who has dedicated part of his life to understand how art and culture can create spaces of community that other efforts do not achieve. That culture is an essential need, not an element of the core. It is, for him, art a place where we can learn how to live together. So I give the floor to them.
La invitación hemos quedado que empezaría yo por la invitación y por la ocasión ayer de experimentar lo que significa construir comunidad a través de las artes, a través de la música, de la performance teatral. Para mí la invitación es un reto porque
I believe invitation is a challenge. I have more experience when thinking on antagonism, hostilities, confrontation, wars, and not so much what it means building communities. It is true that I've devoted part of this task for a long time, thinking on the cultural sense of thinking that culture saves us is our healing method to solve current confrontations. And we must understand that culture is what divides us and separates us. It is likely the source of plenty of the conflicts we are witnessing at present in the most horrible manners. If we think of battles being happening with regards to identities and nations and with collective memories, but also what it entails in social networks understood as alternative communities, isolating and separating human beings, the political exploitation of fear towards the other, of blaming the other about society's problems in an exclusive sense of community. Here in our country, recently, we are seeing a new proposal of the national priority, meaning that community is not a welcoming place anymore. So community is part of the solution and part of the problem at the same time. It depends on how we understand it. Community can be understood, unfortunately, as what separates and divides us. So we need to think of this contraposition between differences and community issues. So the challenge is how can we build community above differences, even though differences exist? We should pose the question, can a different culture be possible? Can we go further from a fragmented culture into a myriad of different cultures? Thus, culture is the path towards the common towards the possibility of imagining a community that would be a supra community, a community linking and joining all of us above any other form of culture. This is not a simple task whatsoever. We need to redefine this meaning, this sense of community. And there are plenty of models that thought has given us in order to do this. Daniel Allen, in Talking to Stranger, talks about democracy as a meeting of unknown or people who don't know each other, and it's simply based on trusting foreigners or strangers. So it's precisely against the idea of extermination, segregation, division, trying to create identical communities to gather everyone being the same under the same umbrella. Achille Mbembe also thinks about the idea of the politics of violence and exclusion. So how can we get away from this loop? I believe the true challenge is to achieving the other to be important, their pain, feeling for the other's pain, being able of suffering for our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Palestine. And this is unfortunately something that needs to be created in a conscious manner. It doesn't come for free. The everyday challenge is then how to educate on empathy and solidarity. I mean, which types of tools do we have through existing institutions, the academia, educational centers, so that they can translate this obsessive education on utilitarian education, whether you need to know more maths or facts that may help students fit into the labor market, but rather how we can build communities with educated citizens. Which are the values we need to have into our system whereby our youngs are learning. This Anthony Appiah talks in one of his works, Cosmopolitism, Ethics in a World of Strangers, on how to live currently in this world where we are surrounded by people who don't share plenty of our cultural parameters. So this way of looking into each other, this gaze, worrying about the other, far away from whether he or she has been born here or whether they live in our neighborhood. It's true that Sandra says, let's give practical solutions. Please don't ask me to do this. If I had this magical wand, I wouldn't be sitting here. Believe me. I believe that here we should all think, how can we build an invisible community? Because yesterday we got together, we talked about the physical materiality of our bodies. How can we build this invisible community far beyond the visibility horizon? A community, I mean, transmitting our empathy, solidarity, our connections with those far beyond our immediate relationship. Marina Garcés has a piece titled The Passion of Strangers, A Philosophy of Friendship. And in this book, where she talks about the everyday life idea of friendship, she links utopia and friendship in the sense that friendship is a bond we feel with people with whom we don't have other connections. This is the specificity of friendship. And Garcés links this to the utopian discourse by Gibson, the idea of a desire, of ideas, of this shared mentality. And here, the idea, the concept of fraternity, having the roots not in the Enlightenment, it comes from the classical Greeks and the first days of Christianism. This desire, this longing for fraternity, representing, Garcés says, the reciprocity and benevolence between strangers. It's about putting the friendship right at the center of our collective life. It's about thinking of the other and sharing battles. And again, this makes me think about Camus' lessons. It's about trust, loyalty, shared ideas, common action, these types of connections linking us in a fraternal manner with our friends, and the other ones being broken when communities are divided. The condition of fraternity, and this is the invocation by Appia when they talk about cosmopolitism, is that this condition of seeing every single human being from a fraternal standpoint is the base of human rights. A concept such as human rights cannot be understood if we don't understand, we don't acknowledge what links us and bonds us all from this standpoint. So fraternity is not something there that we can describe, we witness on our everyday basis. It's a call, it's a demand, it's a horizon of opportunities. It is something where we need to be, like Appia says, we need to be educated ethically on a daily basis. And Garcés links to the idea of brotherhood or comrade since it disappeared from the political left Marxist political parties. This comradeship or camaraderie is the community being linked in the fight, in the battle. And again, I think of Camus. It's a repertoire of modus operandi. It's a way of life. Like Foucault, friendship, he says, it's a way of life that should be right at the basis of other forms of being social. So building fraternity with the criteria we are using to define friendship as a bond between strangers, with people with whom we don't have any other connection. And this camaraderie recognizes in this battle the idea that we are in front of a utopia, a horizon full of opportunities, what Garcés coins as a promise. We are connected to a future promise. It's not something for which we have a manual of instructions and a specific way of working. It's about finding sense amidst chaos. Invoking fraternity and community will not save us from the disastrous reality where we live. This is why I firmly believe that this gathering here is our commitment with utopia. This commitment defines this 10th edition because all of us are fighting towards something that is not here yet. It is something that calls us, is a plea we promise ourselves, and that it entails that we need to be educated, we need to be built on a daily basis to be able to reach this utopia. So, building a community spirit or spirit of community. This building action is precisely the recognition that this is something that we lack right now. We may have it, of course, in this fragmented and division with the myriad of communities to which we belong, but we don't have it as a human, as a single human community. And this is why I like to focus on this suggestion, as Cynthia Fleury mentioned when she talks about the connection between humanism and care, around the idea of manufacturing, building. I mean, the doing, the process, the need of the individual to access, and this is a traditional enlightened idea, to make this capacity as a sovereign fact, something approaching us towards freedom. We are in the middle of a process, and the successful outcome is not guaranteed, and the way things are going on right now, we cannot precisely optimistic, but we do need to keep this promise in our horizon. And with these words, I give the floor to Cynthia.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, je vais.
Thank you very much. I will talk to you in French, and I will make the most to express a heartfelt thank you, because at the beginning, during her first words on why Camus even today, and why all these learnings around the Camusian learnings and the sentence on his notebooks, I hope I am awaiting this huge catastrophe to come. He also adds up to which point our task is constant, because it's not about the task of those building, but rather those impeding or trying to stop this world from disappearing. So it's all about what can we do when we face this type of trying to stop things being destroyed. So it's a building process to impede destruction. So this is why fraternity and Camusian learnings are so well rooted from the existential standpoint, is really, really useful. And in the plague, in a real and symbolic way, and how we intervene, and what we see in the stranger too, with the phenomenon of getting away, feeling separated from the world, not feeling something, this feeling this indifference, little by little, he's getting away from this world. So it's living this experience of the absurdity of and the indifference and banality and brutality. So we embody this, and Camus shows us that community, fraternity, and these ideas are really fragile. And if we it should be something operative. If we're not aware of it, if we don't have the conscious will of doing it, we can only forget about bigger ideas and focus on specific actions. And we can see it in the plague. we see that it's not the theory, but it's rather the community and the doing, the actions. This is truly what it's a very lucid and conscious action. So we should flee this absurdity. This fraternity is the only tool that's going to save us. And and when we talk about empathy and the issue of getting out of our, we don't have any capacity to get away from that core, that center. So it's the unease of the other. How do we dissociate this unease and considering that this malaise is, or this discomfort is affecting also us. So this shared reality can help us as human beings to access to vulnerability. If we share something in common, if we are all in a situation of vulnerability, what do? We can die, we can suffer accidents, we can suffer illnesses. So the connecting link of all of this is vulnerability. We are all vulnerable. And then the options in our community, the ways we can understand what is fraternity and what it's not. And here we're talking about how we socialize vulnerability, how common collective choices can create social, cultural, etc. vulnerabilities, and how we can reinforce this first prime idea of this ontological vulnerability, because at the end of the day, we are destined to die. In the hospital, when the chair was created, it was done with a Camusian spirit because we wanted to show our fraternity, our capacity to create community. We wanted to set up a camaraderie, sort of sisterhood and brotherhood with the same idea and deterritorialize our standpoints. I'll give you a few examples. This global world that we've all witnessed, it's something that it detemporalizes us. It separates us from space. We don't have a gathering with time and space anymore. What type of impact has this in all of us emotionally? Globalization has created tensions, regimes, wounded regimes, totally unstable. And Sandra was talking about the act of presence, being present. We are not any longer in this time and space at the present time. We don't have the habit of the other as the smell, the body, that human presence, that the other is what is resisting. It's not the one responding immediately to my desire. We have rather built a world that is responding immediately to desire, and the figure of the other is right at the antipodes. So fraternity is, first of all, an experience of what I am not, what I am resisting against, what I don't understand, and evidently this requires conscious work. And in the philosophy, um, in the philosophical world and the academia, we are interested to focus on the difficulty of great ideas. This is what moves us. Everybody will talk about fraternity in an abstract manner, but is someone really ready to bear the burden of this fraternity in a really painful manner? This is what really means to care for others. This is what we were interested in, this taking care of lands these great ideas. And uh, as anything difficult in this life, we need to understand it. We need to find the tools so that it's less difficult, less painful, because we don't want to be sacrificing um, uh, uh, constantly. This difficulty is not that difficult, but it has um, something really interesting. There's something irreducible. It shows an ethos, an ethic value, a way of being. And Sandra has mentioned it really nicely. It shows us a type of acting, of being, which we've coined the clinics of dignity. What does this mean? Mainly two very basic things. One, it helps us create learning communities and creative communities, communities building, manufacturing things, great things. These clinic of dignity entails that we need to flee the negation of vulnerability, and that this world thinking that we will solve all vulnerability by making it invisible and closing it in a closet, it only reinforces this vulnerability. And this world, the first relationship with vulnerability is to stigmatize and bully the other, because we need to destigmatize, we need to fly away from the fact we judge others, we have prejudices, and vulnerability is a primal element. We are all vulnerable. And vulnerability, it also has to do with knowledge, with the singularity. We are researchers, professors, doctors, anthropologists, part of this cathedra. And vulnerability is the starting point. It's feeding us because it learns us. We learn from it in the sense that it's the knowledge on our situation. We have located it in the epistemological part of our tasks. We do a cartography of vulnerabilities in our academic world. Sometimes people don't want to see what doesn't work, but we say, hey, this is great. What is not working properly is real life, is knowledge, diversity of different standpoints. So it's the epistemological nature of things. It's knowledge. We do this mapping when other people accept working with us. We map all these systemic organization, worldwide vulnerabilities to try to understand how these specific dialectics and dialogues are happening currently. And it helps us understand how we can build this community of fraternity. And in our professorship, we also understand that even though vulnerability entails negative consequences, it's also important to understand all intersectionality and all phenomena reinforcing these vulnerabilities. Because when we build a community, we need to build this circle of vulnerabilities. And we're also see whatever is vulnerable as a design theory, in the sense that these creation theories are seen as vulnerable. I'll give you an example. If we need to define a protocol, whatever it is, for example, in a psychiatric, our chair is at the Saint-Anne Psychiatry and Neuroscience Hospital. So let's imagine we need to define a new protocol to cover an alternative towards contention, because as you know, in psychiatric wards, they are still tied and contained. This is a both chemical and physical containment. It's a total disaster in both cases. So our task is to offer alternatives, not on containment, but on content. Here we are containing each other, but I'm not tying you up. I'm not handcuffing you. We are here being contained in a spontaneous manner because we have this capacity. But psychiatric patients with serious illnesses or pathologies cannot self-contain. So we need to activate their capacity to self-contain. And we reflect with them on what it means to self-contain. When we work with bipolar patients, we co-design protocols together. It's something very basic. And it just means that vulnerability is an agent of transformation. And as we are all vulnerable, this helps us transform our power within our vulnerability. And often we see that vulnerability is at the root of something universal. What will be useful for vulnerable people, it will be useful for the whole of community. And often we see that these vulnerable people are very resilient. Health democracy, for example, these days in France, it has not been made up for the normal patient, but health democracy comes directly from the HIV patients, allowing us today to have this democratic health system, in the sense that these patients were the most abundant, and they allowed us to build extraordinary institutional tools for the whole of pathologies, including HIV, but plenty more. So we see that it's an example of vulnerable works for vulnerable morgues.
So this really strengthens our citizenship. And the truth is that in the future, we will all suffer from systemic vulnerabilities. It could be pandemics, it could be mega fires, terrorist attacks, or systemic catastrophes. It's the systemic vulnerabilities that is what is marking the 21st century. And this, we need to create fraternity. We need to be able to do this because we need to learn how to create engineering elements around vulnerable people. Otherwise, we will not be able to face the destabilizing phenomena that will take place. So in a moment of survival, And it's a wonderful dream in literature to have this emergence of fraternity facing catastrophes. But you know, it's only in literature that we have that. In reality, we need to have some experience, some experiments and testing of protocols that will reinvent our solidarity, fraternity, and capacity to build a community in a degraded context environment. In the future, if there's a siege or the rationalization of extreme scarcity of water or electricity, those are degraded contexts. How can we continue defending community there? We will find a way of doing that, but it will be much easier if we can invent protocols that will be solid and robust to be able to resist this deterioration that is coming, so that degraded modes do not become degrading lives. And this is also what Camus is teaching us, because Camus knew that there was a very severe fragility and that this can be done because we have created a chair on philosophy at hospital, but not in university, which would be the logical place for a chair of philosophy. But we decided to place it in the hospital, and now we have 17 offices or antenna in different hospitals and also abroad with doctors, physicians, nurses, families, patients, and not only in psychiatry, but also in pediatrics, surgery, teenager or adolescent medicine. Lots of a great number of physicians that want to accompany their patients on the basis of vulnerabilities that we face every single day, and not using or applying a stigma on people. Thank you very much. Well, this is a conversation amongst us, between us, and then we'll give the floor to the questions of the audience. When thinking about vulnerability, this makes me think of precarity, inherent precarity of human beings in the world, and how. Are you receiving the translation?
No.
Yes. So how the precarity of human beings in the world is accompanied by fear. I have the impression that fear is the main political tool that is really founded on the vulnerability of people, of individuals, in order to project towards the outside a false feeling of protection through the isolation or isolating ourselves from potential threats. So when you're talking about sovereignty, I am very much interested by the idea of sovereignty implying the use of human capacities or competences that allow us to manage and negotiate this precariousness or insecurity we have in the world, because these capacities make us free, because they allow us to acquire knowledge, protocols that will allow us to manage challenging situations. And today, what we see is that we're constantly delegating sovereignty. In the face of fear, people are looking for answers outsides of themselves, not their own responses or commitments, but someone that will tell them what to do from the outside. And this delegation of sovereignty that would, well, if we're thinking about sovereignty, that is something that is individual and community represents a collective element, then I would believe we could think that sovereignty is the opposite to community. But as you're explaining this, they're both together because individual that are sovereign and with a commitment with the concept of together, that's the only way to think about an answer for collective problems. So this means that we all need to be engaged together. And this delegation of knowledge, of information, the delegation or even the fact of transferring all this to machines with artificial intelligence, consultation of how to face human or deal with human experiences. And therefore, this goes against the concept of building ourselves as a community because our sovereignty, we're delegating it. And it is, in fact, what would allow us to have a conversation among individuals that are sovereign. Okay, well, it's not that easy, also with the translation. We're talking about sovereignty, isn't it? In the sense of being sovereign of the individual. Yes, yes. Not the national sovereignty. Okay, so there are several things here. When we are defending or advocating for these approaches of capacity building in the context of vulnerability, I'd like to explain something. To have the advocate for this kind of approach is not an act of renunciation. Well, we could think that there are vulnerabilities, okay. So, well, you can find solutions with that, and you're accepting the ones that have all the power. But we're talking about individual vulnerabilities, but also organizational vulnerabilities that are manufactured. And you're right with that. We need to be careful with that. But nevertheless, we need to here to restore mental and physical health of the individuals who are there. And that's very important for us. It's not minor because in most of systems there's an explanation saying that the individual level is not important. I am a clinician and I know that the collective level, collectively, the groups where the individual situation is not taken into account create groups that are based on hatred. So the individual level is always important, but it's always insufficient, of course, but it will always be important. So we need to work on the individual level. And in order to do that, we need to organize the different departments. If you want to work on in the individual level, you are forced to transform the dysfunctional world around you. But in our case, health, mental and physical health of these individuals, what do we do about this? Well, we help them overcome the violence of this world through the social, well, fighting social injustice by creating community. And this is a commitment, an engagement, a commitment that will protect individuals and their sovereignty, but also these individuals, they recover a sort of ethics of the promise. And this means that they go into the game of the collective approach, and that is social justice for everyone. Because if you think that groups that are based on hatred will create social justice for all, well, I must tell you that you're wrong, because hatred leads to hatred of oneself, of the other, and a justice that is only based on the rights for ourselves and against other people. So we need to go over violence and this um, resentment to be able to overcome all this, because we need to overcome resentment. For us, we call this the care climate, let's say. And this is a word game, well, a game of words, because we have many flaws and we like to use words. So we're talking no care of the climate with a climate of care. So very complicated. But what does that mean? The climate issue, of course, it's really important, serious for everyone. But if we don't have a climate of care in the society, then the climate issue will not be important either. So the idea here is to have the social contract, the natural contract altogether intertwined. So this chair of philosophy that was really small started spreading and started scaling up and working collectively with 17 offices in France and abroad, several thousand people who are working on this. And now we have a city, Samerajan, Samerajanjal. It's a city not far away from Bordeaux. 33,000 inhabitants that for these last 3 years, and lately there have been municipal elections, and so we'll have another 6 years. So 9 years as a whole, nearly as many as the Trobades. And during those years, we will be doing action research in this municipality. So in the city council, we will have transformed the retirement, the elderly home, the community health center, schools, the forest, because we have created forest city or forest town. So very specific. So we've been working on the care of the dead, funeral, and these kind of things. We're going to have an exemption for the second funeral forest in France. There's another one in Alsace. We also have the terramation that is called. There are many individuals who want to be buried in a different way, in the water, in the land, without coffins, and we're taking care of all that. So all these mental and physical health is used. We are bodies, as Sandra mentioned earlier on, and therefore we also have our wounds. We have a headache, our back aches, and we need care. And this is done through fraternity. And political things and clinical things need to come together to be able to maintain democratic principles, but it's very tiring, and we need competences and to be robust and solid.
pas le micro. Attends, attends, 2 secondes. Je me mets le truc dans le machin.
Just a minute.
Voilà, voilà. Nous sommes bien faibles. Alors, vas-y.
We are very weak. When you're explaining your work, I cannot avoid thinking that is truly it's a pity, a true pity, that those who are for division, hatred, separation have access to so powerful tools, instruments that they are blocking all this work that is done in the proximity so that it won't reach further distances. But nevertheless, their destruction campaigns have this universal scope, planetary scope. And this is a terrible imbalance. And it's very difficult to accept because it really goes against and clashes with this idea of sovereignty and what can we do, and really incentivates this terrible feeling, which I believe is an epidemic, which is the feeling of despair and feeling also the helplessness. And we're talking about this general feeling of there's nothing we can do about this. And this is a terrible epidemic, I believe, in the world. But here we are thinking about what can be done. Here there are some people discussing this, and you have a network that is very important, but nothing in comparison to what Elon Musk has. And this is a struggle, devastating and very asymmetric.
Oui, ben je sais bien, puisque c'est
Well, yes,
l'argument
I'm totally aware of
classique
this. This is the classical and very real argument, of course.
des échelles, des forces de frappe.
The scales and the
Le monde qui est en face de nous est un monde très
strengths
résistant.
that are
Je ne parle même pas d'Elon Musk, parce que Elon Musk encore, bon,
and
moi j'ai
fire powers, the strike forces. I am a very small Elon Musk myself.
Donc, si vous voulez, il n'y a pas que les grands ennemis.
So
Il y
there
a
are not only the very big enemies, but we also face a great number of individuals
résistent de manière
who
très
resist
contemporaine
very strongly and who are blocking this work we do.
en 10 ans, puisque nous, on a été
So in 10 years,
16, donc
because we were founded in 2016 or the end of 2015, so we're now we have over 10 years of existence, and we have faced a lot of resistance too. Many people have joined us, but others are resisting.
c'est là où le niveau individuel est à la fois
And this is where the individual
et en même temps
level is weak and at the same time strong.
les individus me disent mais mon Dieu, on peut
What
rien
does this
faire.
mean? When individuals say we're not doing nothing and we will lose this match, but I say, well, not really or not totally. If you join this experimentation, this fraternal experimentation where we're going to work on competences and capacities, you will be feel better. And that is the clinical reality. And yes, the world will not be transformed. That's true. But your life will be transformed because you will avoid depression. You will suffer from less diseases. You will enjoy friendship, love, and other things, and you will find a meaning for your life. So this small individual level that can be dismissed for some will allow you to find the courage to act. And I also tell them you will be manufacturing victory for others. And I'm talking, this is the collective victory. So Suddenly there is a threshold. But I do think this is very important to restore this clinical level. This is not an individual clinical approach, but in the sense of how I build myself as a self, as a person, and then also in order to build this individualization that will be proper, then and appropriate, I need to interact with others. And we are an institution where we try to create small facilities that will restore bonds in a quality way. And we have the University of Sorbonne, the Faculty of Medicine of Salpêtrière. Also, we have psychiatry and neuroscience in Paris and many other institutions. And for us, it is very important to re-enter this area so that this institution, instead of being inert like old institutions, that it really is institution that is fighting for the clinical treatment of dignity. So, before we can transform an institution, it becomes a bit violent, but then, so we went into the institution to transform it from the inside. I understand, I listen to what you're saying, I agree, but yes, nevertheless, it is possible today and still to link yourself to a group that is working on capacities to transform something that will be a small scale, but this is small scale twinned with other small scales will lead to important works, and also with the meta level that we're doing too, because we're working at the national level, we're working on laws, but also the UN level too. The UN is in a bad condition right now, so it's the right time to go and do advocacy there.
Si nos dan la luz, podremos ver si hay
So,
preguntas.
can we turn the lights on so we can see the audience? Please try to be short in your questions, so brief, so that very specific, so that we can answer those questions.
Moltes gràcies per les vostres intervencions. Crec que són molt importants com una
I am Margarita Ferrer. Thank you very much for your interventions, your discussion. They are very important for reflection. And also, I wanted to offer some hope to our community in Minorca, where there are many organizations that are working in favor of the solidarity and commitment with others. So we will try to collaborate as much as we can. And I want to invite anyone to join us, because everybody is welcome. So I would like to ask for any suggestions and proposals for our future work. Thank you very much.
Sí, muchas gracias. La pregunta, Cynthia, sobre esto.
Thank you very much.
El tejido de lo que hacéis en Francia.
Fabric of what you're doing in France. I'd like to know how you're doing that at the national level, but also the international level.
Esta carrera o esta clínica a otros países del mundo, quizás aquí a España.
So I'd like to know how this kind of clinical approach could be applied to other countries in the world, and perhaps Spain too. The answer is yes. Today, there are several axes on this chair, and we have the developmental clinic approach to have offices in other countries. We have 3 offices in Congo. In DRC, and I can also talk about that if you want. There's another office in Mali, and then there's another one in Charleroi, in the hospital, and another one that is being set up in Jerusalem. In DRC, in Congo, it's in the Tansi Hospital, the Mikoge Hospital, that works on sexual violences in the context of rights and the war. So the bodies of women that are mutilated, extremely mutilated, and the office of the chair of philosophy is not decided by us. Must be the hospital who asks to join our network. So these are things that we've been asked for. So they contact us and ask for support. For example, also to the clinical treatment of trauma. Sometimes also we get applications because they want help to show that they want to work on resilience. And in DRC, this becomes political. These shows territorially that, well, in this world, we have the global south, where they are suffering from catastrophe that we will, in the future, suffer, all of us. So the chair of philosophy has had 600 publications, papers up to now, and several PhD theses and offices in many places. And there are many things that can be done. So we have the territorial approach with decentralization. And this was in France, working with the periphery and everywhere, and that's the chair mainly in France. And then there are foreign offices where we try to work also with a common approach, a shared approach.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, but the microphone is giving us some trouble. We cannot hear the floor properly. Thank you very much for your intervention. Your intervention has been brilliant and really touching. I studied clinical psychology in France, and the reflection that you're doing on institutions, I believe, is really interesting in the sense that France has a very powerful tradition on the links with institutional therapeutical psychiatry. which does not it doesn't work the same in Spain. Your career is really interesting. Thank you very much. I wonder whether this could also be feasible to implement in Spain. This institutional psychotherapy in France is not really much appreciated. The truth is that there are some issues, and we have inherited the old therapy style founded in the 40s, especially by François Tusquets, amongst other specialists. And currently, we have institutions of institutional psychotherapy, for those of you knowing it, or one of the philosophical antennas. We have maybe not mentioned it so much in detail. Maybe you know some hospitals in the 12th neighborhood in the 12th district of Paris. Nicolas Philibert filmed about this district, the 12th district, on institutional psychotherapy. And he had also filmed some other stories on some other clinical institutions. And on a daily basis, we see indeed how French institutions are responding to this institutional psychotherapy, affirm or asserting that it does work. But I am in a country working on these issues, but not everything's perfect. I mean, we are still resisting. We have a really great collective, thanks to which, and it's a French group, but also working worldwide, we respond to such topics. At least we get together and work on common workshops, they work together. Even though the everyday hardships regarding psychotherapy in France, these past movements are still on, and we are pushing towards changing things. Right, I think I need to thank you both for your interventions. Thank you very much.
Merci de nous donner l'espoir de cette possibilité et qu'on a du travail devant nous à construire cette possibilité. Merci à vous, vraiment.
Thank you very much.